Stream at nepm.org.
We want teachers to use our films and to use the resources it took to write those stories in their classrooms and on PBS Learning media that's available. For people who are inspired or whose interest is piqued on a topic by virtue of watching one of our films, we want them to have avenues to learn more. That's why we made the film. And we know that with PBS, that's going to happen.
You're watching New England Public Media, WGBY Springfield.
Broadway shows always come and go. And then COVID happened. Broadway itself disappeared. Now, don't miss all the hard work everyone brought to the biggest reopening ever, the Broadway Revival.
There's no place like home.
From great performances.
Great performances Tuesday at 9 or stream at nepm.org.
Coming up, we're connecting you with the creativity and culture in your community, including a nature conservatory with wings.
It's always summer here, so we always say instead of going south, go to South Deerfield.
The body adorned, rare works from the ancient Americas on display in a new exhibition.
When an individual donned that pendant, they might take on the attributes of a jaguar.
And we'll explore the history of the Cape Cod Canal.
Between 1626 and the mid-20th century, there were between 3,000 and 4,000 shipwrecks.
Join us for those stories and more as we explore the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. Up next on Connecting Point.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us for Connecting Point, your source for creativity, culture, and community. I'm Saidalis Bauer. When George Miller was contracted to build a butterfly conservatory in South Deerfield in 1998, he had no idea he was constructing it for himself. Soon after its opening, Miller took sole ownership of Magic Wings and created one of the most unique destinations in Western Massachusetts. After his passing in 2017, George's children took over the operation and have successfully continued his legacy. Connecting Point's Brian Sullivan traveled to Franklin County to visit this magical butterfly sanctuary and brings us the story.
There's a little stretch of road along Route 5 in South Deerfield where, whatever season it may be, its earmarks are on full display for all those passing through. This roadside farm stand was shuttered almost as quickly as the first frost's arrival. Many trees have been stripped bare of their fall foliage, not to return for several months. A tractor rests in seeming suspended animation with nothing left to harvest. By all indications, it's late fall in South Deerfield, with winter fast approaching. Unless, of course, we're inside this building only a few hundred yards away. In here, it's one temperature year-round, and the countless Lepidoptera, or butterflies as us regular folks know them, are living and thriving in it. Seem too magical to be true? Well, it's in the name for a reason.
It's always summer here, so we always say instead of going south, go to South Deerfield. So we have butterflies flying year-round, rain or shine. We're temperature controlled, so no matter what the weather is outside, it's always butterflies flying all day long. We pretty much mimic the temperatures in like a tropical rainforest. So the nighttime temperatures are somewhere in the mid-60s to upper 60s, depending on the time of year. The daytime we shoot for middle to upper 70s. But, you know, if the sun comes out, it's going to be a little bit warmer in there. It's always about 5 to 10 degrees cooler in the summertime because we have a shade cloth to help reduce the temperature a little bit, so it's not uncomfortable. But in the wintertime, we try to maintain around 75 to 78 degrees.
In the conservatory, the butterflies feast on these nectar feeders, and that's because most of the plants in here are not host plants. The reason for that is they're not allowed to have the butterflies actually breeding out here. And that's a good thing, since the caterpillars would destroy the beautiful plant life. Besides, there were already enough butterflies in this room. How many? Well, the answer is a bit complex.
We raise a lot of butterflies in-house, so we raise about 70% of the population, but we import about 70% of the diversity, meaning that some of the butterflies we have, we don't have the host plants for or we can't breed. So we'll get 5 or 10 or 20 in a shipment, and we help support farmers and farms in other countries that actually farm butterflies and help save the rainforest, because you need the rainforest to grow butterflies. So we probably have about 50 to 60 different species at any given time. and probably about 3,000 to 4,000 butterflies flying.
The butterflies may receive the lion's share of the attention, but visitors are also welcome to take a look at some neat reptiles and some exotic creepy crawlies. For some, these are the most interesting creatures on Earth, while others may find the quickest exit. Luckily, this one leads directly to the Butterfly Conservatory, and for anyone passing through these doors for the first time, the experience is a bit surreal.
Well, I can add this to the list of things I've never seen before. Not only that, but in my entire life, I don't think I've ever had a butterfly actually land on me. And just a few minutes ago, I think I had about 10 all over me. It's really pretty fascinating.
This 8,000 square foot building wasn't always this big. In fact, when it first opened, it was half this size. It's also entirely possible that none of this would be here at all, had George Miller not taken this on as a construction project back in 1998, before eventually being talked into partnering in this business.
It started out with two people, and some things went awry a little bit in the beginning, and he kind of stepped in, and he pretty much threw a lot of his savings and everything into it, and he believed it was going to become something, and I bet the family probably thought he was pretty silly for wanting to go into a butterfly business, but it took off like a rocket. I mean, it did really well, and thanks to the family, they got it moving.
Every week, Connecting Point explores the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. But it doesn't stop there. You can find us online anytime for exclusive features and content. Magic Wings is best known as a butterfly sanctuary, but in this week's digital exclusive, curator Fred Gagnon shows Connecting Point producer Brian Sullivan some of the other interesting creatures at the facility that don't receive the same fanfare as the butterflies.
We try to get some creatures of really, pretty colors and something that stands out and things that are astonishing, either really well camouflaged that you would never see or something that's really bright colors you wouldn't normally see in nature.
You can find that digital exclusive online right now at nepm.org/connectingpoint. The Springfield Museums is currently presenting a new bilingual exhibit entitled The Body Adorned, Artistry and Legacy of the Ancient Americas. The exhibition, which is presented in English and Spanish, will be on display through February 27th at the D'Amour Museum of Fine Arts and features rare adornments and textiles made by artists working during the pre-Hispanic period. Some of the objects on display were crafted between 400 and 1500 CE and represent the ancient cultures of Colombia, Costa Rica, Panama, Peru, and Mexico. I spoke with Maggie North, curator of art at the Springfield Museums, to learn more.
This is a really special exhibition because it features artworks that are on loan to the Springfield Museums from the Museum of Fine Arts Boston. So they're pieces that we wouldn't otherwise be able to share with our audiences. And the exhibition was really born out of a partnership between the Springfield Museums and the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, which is funded by Art Bridges. And through that partnership, the goal was really to share artwork and share collections. So by bringing these works of art to Springfield, we're achieving that and putting them in an exciting new context. And it was so much fun to come together and to think about how traditions of body adornment in the ancient Americas resulted in the exquisite objects that are on view.
This exhibit explores the artistry and legacy of the ancient Americas, as you were just saying. But one question that I had was, how is ancient America actually defined?
In this context and in art history, when we refer to the arts of the ancient Americas, typically we mean art that was created before the turn of the 16th century in Mesoamerica, Central America, and South America, so before any European contact, and really exploring and celebrating the indigenous artworks that were being created during that time. Certainly the word pre-Hispanic can also be used to define this era. And within the exhibition, visitors will find works of art that were created during this period, including nose rings, pectorals, objects that were made of textiles or fabrics that were hand woven and were incredibly valuable to the cultures who created them. So it's an exciting exploration of this time period, which is quite long chronologically. We have works that are over 1,000 years old and works that were created in the 1500s.
I understand that there are 16 works of art in this exhibit. And as you were saying, they provide a glimpse into that pre-Hispanic era of the ancient Americas. What did we learn and what have we learned through these artifacts about these people that lived in those times?
One of the wonderful parts of this exhibition is that we learn how these works of art were not just decorative. They weren't just jewelry as we might think of jewelry today, or clothing as we might think of clothing today. In fact, they often served a cultural or social or spiritual purpose. We know, for example, that some of the textiles that are in the exhibition, a wari hat, for example, would have been worn both in life and in death. So it may have allowed somebody to express their culture both within their daily life and in the world beyond or to the gods. Often within the adornments, we also see representations of zoomorphic or animal-like forms, and we can learn a lot about how the cultures that are represented valued these animals. For example, we have a wonderful jaguar pendant, which was made in Costa Rica, and we know that the jaguar was an incredibly important animal, thought to be an excellent hunter, a powerful and fierce animal. And so when an individual donned that pendant, they might take on the attributes of a jaguar.
When I was walking through the exhibit, the first thing that immediately struck me was how old and how well preserved these artifacts were. And one of my favorite pieces was a nearly 1,500-year-old Peruvian tunic made out of these vibrant, colorful feathers. I was just amazed how rich the color still was after so much time. You were just talking about the jaguar, but what are some of your other favorite pieces part of this exhibit?
One of my favorite pieces in the exhibition I mentioned briefly earlier is in that same gallery. It's a hat that was created between 700 and 900 CE, and it was also preserved in the arid desert climates of Peru. Represented on the hat are animal-like figures that are reminiscent of llamas or alpacas. And in fact, the hat would have been made from hand-spun wool that was sourced from llamas or alpacas. And I think it's a great example of the way in which the exhibition speaks to the artistry, the incredible talent and skill of these makers. Not only has it survived, but it's just in pristine condition. And the design would have been thoroughly planned before it was executed.
What questions, feelings, and or even connections do you hope that this exhibit will spark inside visitors?
One of the pieces that we decided to include from an interpretation standpoint in this exhibition is a map that shows the modern locations of where the ancient pieces would have come from. So connecting some of our Peruvian textiles to the places in which they would have been made. And I hope that visitors come in and they can come away with a better sense of the amazing works of art that were being created in these locations in the Americas. So often when we talk about American art or we talk about art of the Americas, I think that we think of the United States, but the story is so much broader. And so I'm excited to bring in this expanded look at the arts of the Americas and to think about the way in which those artistic traditions do endure and have become an integral part of the story of our history.
Each year, hundreds of thousands of people heading to vacation cross over the Cape Cod Canal using one of 3 bridges. For decades, these steel structures have been a staple of daily life for both Cape Codders and visitors alike. But they are not the original bridges. And in fact, the canal that people cross today is much different from the one that first opened back in 1914. Producer Dave Frazier takes us on a journey to explore the history of the Cape Cod Canal.
For many of us who travel to the Cape, we feel as though we have not made it until we've crossed the bridge. The Sagamore, Bourne, and Railroad bridges have become the unofficial gateway to Cape Cod. But did you ever wonder about the canal that those bridges traverse? Today, it is an important waterway for navigators and a recreational resource for many. But the idea for the canal dates back to the 1620s.
There were 2 rivers here before, the Scusset and the Manamet, that both went inland, but kind of in different directions. and it had been a place where the Wampanoag would carry their canoes across from one river to the other when they were crossing from the Cape Cod Bay to Buzzards Bay. 1623, you had Miles Standish saying we should put a canal through here.
Meanwhile, the treacherous outer shores of Cape Cod stranded many ships, claiming nearly a wreck a week, according to historians, during the height of the commercial shipping era, giving the Outer Cape the ominous nickname of the Graveyard of the Atlantic.
This was basically an avenue of commerce. Ships had to go around here between Boston and New York. It was estimated that between 1626 and the mid-20th century, there were between 3,000 and 4,000 shipwrecks along Cape Cod's outer beach.
Attempts to build a canal had been unsuccessful until, in 1904, a wealthy financier named August Belmont moved ahead with a plan to connect the Monument and Scusset rivers. Along with civil engineer William Barclay Parsons, Belmont was confident they could succeed where others had failed. In June of 1909, construction started on the canal. Dredges of various sizes dug from each bay toward the middle. Bad weather, clay, and large boulders slowed the progress. A narrow-gauge railroad was installed to move dirt and equipment back and forth.
They finally come to this center point that they've set up, Foley's Dyke, and that's the place where they have the ceremony of the joining of the waters, and they cut through, and suddenly Cape Cod Bay and Buzzards Bay are connected.
2 drawbridges and a railroad bridge were installed along with a passenger ferry to allow people to cross the canal. Belmont's canal, however, never achieved the level of traffic or revenue its investors had envisioned, and in the end, it was deemed a financial failure.
He did it entirely with his own funding and funding that he was able to get together with the idea that he would be able to pay it off and make a profit from the tolls. Well, that never really happened for a number of reasons, and I think that probably Belmont ended up losing money on the canal.
Seeing value in this waterway, the U.S. government purchased the canal in 1928 and began construction to widen and deepen it, as well as build 3 new bridges.
Now, all 3 bridges that were constructed along the Cape Cod Canal were financed underneath the National Industrial Recovery Act of 1933. That's your New Deal program. About $4.6 million was allocated to the canal, and it put many local people to work during the construction.
Today, the Cape Cod Canal is not only a navigable waterway, snaking its way between Cape Cod Bay and Buzzards Bay, it is a recreational resource for fishing, biking, and sightseeing.
We see roughly about 15,000 vessels that go through the Cape Cod Canal every year. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers operates a marine traffic control center that allow us to communicate with and track all vessels. There's a little bit more than 1,100 acres of federal lands that surround the canal. We're visited by about 3 million people annually.
It's a really important engineering marvel. It's still the widest sea level canal in the world, and it made Cape Cod an island. It wasn't a peninsula anymore.
This past summer marked 60 years of the Cape Cod National Seashore, as established on August 7, 1961 by President John F. Kennedy. And if you're dreaming of summertime sand, sea, and sunshine during this frigid week and weren't able to make it to the Cape yourself this year, have no fear. Producer Dave Frazier takes us there in a warm and sunny digital extra. Don't miss this digital extra online right now at nepm.org/connectingpoint. Initially beginning as a limited series of theater workshops at the Hampshire Jail and House of Corrections, the Performance Project is still around more than 20 years later, strengthening youth leadership in our communities. Through various performances, projects, and visual arts created and inspired by the young participants, the Performance Project is engaging its members and audiences by bringing awareness to social justice issues and community engagement. I spoke with the co-directors from the Performance Project to hear more about their work.
I was invited by the Hampshire County Jail to co-lead a workshop. It was a dance and theater workshop for men who were incarcerated at the jail. And it was initially supposed to be a 14-week workshop culminating in a performance. And the audience was both the inside audience of men who were incarcerated at the jail and the general public. And it was so impactful, both in the participants' lives and in the audience's experience, that we were invited to repeat that. And the next time we did it, it was we took 6 months to create a performance and build up the performing ensemble. And that's how it began.
This was supposed to be a very limited project, but now it has grown 20 years past the fact. Who do you encourage to be part of this project now, today?
So the overarching answer is that we encourage everybody to participate. We hold youth at the core of the work that we're doing in First Generation and Ubuntu Arts Community, but ultimately we have family and community celebrations. We want artists to come. We want the general public to come. We want scholars to participate, activists to participate, teachers to participate. And when we have our performances, we're really, we're inviting the general public as well. So holding our First Generation and Ubuntu youth at the center, we hope that it is a community-based initiative.
You mentioned First Generation and Ubuntu, which are components of the Performance Project. Talk to me about those programs. How did they come about, and who are they for, and where did the names come from?
The name of the community is meant to encompass all identities. So initially, we thought of First Generation as being the first in one's family to be growing up in the United States and speaking English. The identity is expanded to a young person who can identify any first in their life. So it might be the first to be an activist. It might be the first in their family to be graduating from high school or going to college. That's First Generation.
Ubuntu is named after the South African philosophy of Ubuntu, which really speaks to the interconnectedness of human beings and how we cannot exist in isolation. It sometimes gets translated to I am because you are, or how each one benefiting from like us coming together really makes us all thrive. So that's very intentional in how we come together in our mentoring, in our being and existing with each other.
Talk to me about some of the creative and artistic works that you do with the Performance Project and how that has been really helpful and beneficial to the members.
What audiences see when they come to see the performances are the final product of stories that are being told based on the personal experiences of ensemble members of the youth.
We are laughing all the way to the well and all the way home. And honestly, I love her.
The one thing that they haven't yet understood until they've performed their stories is how people are going to appreciate receiving them and how the audience sees themselves in the performances. And it's very powerful for them after performing when audience members stand up and say, you just told my story, or I have never been through that. I'm not from Bhutan, I'm not from Nepal or Ethiopia, but I have had a very similar experience. And so there's a kind of a common humanity.
And you mentioned that a lot of these performances are based on their personal and true stories. So they really claim full authorship over their performances. How important is it to offer people this creative freedom?
I think the opportunity for young people to experience being witness is what we provide, because in their daily lives, you know, they are part of just the background. Even when they're in school or at home, they're not at the focal point. And when they come to us, the space is there for them to be seen, heard, and invited in a way that gets them to say, like, oh, they're really interested in me on who I am and what I have to say.
Yeah, and I think part of that environment that you all create is incorporated in another one of your values, which is that you all learn from each other. So in that, what have been some of the things that you all have learned from the members and from these young people part of the performance project?
Young people and everyone will grow when we are consistent, when we hold them accountable, hold them in high regard, when we have high expectation, that magic happens. So we learn that the more that we invest, the more that we bring in and expose everyone to ideas, thoughts, and feelings, that everyone benefits from it.
What is it about the creative arts, do you think, that provides this avenue for relationship and community building? And what conversations do you hope people begin having after they witness one of the performances?
We hope that the audience experiences young people as teachers when they're in the audience. And so the power dynamic is flipped in that moment. And the audiences have the opportunity to see the power and potential of youth.
When we create a space through consistency, through nurturing with caring words and phrases, and just, you know, making the space for connection to happen, then our whole society benefits.
And that does it for this edition of Connecting Point. Remember, you can always find all of the stories that you saw in this episode, as well as exclusive features, digital-only content, and so much more online anytime at nepm.org/connectingpoint. And please be sure to join us again every Thursday and Saturday at 7:30 p.m. right here on New England Public Media for more stories of the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. I'm Saidalis Bauer. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
On American Experience.
Jeans are the quintessential American garment.
Half of the population of the planet is wearing them on any given day.
And yet so much of the story we tell about jeans is a myth.
Riveted, the history of jeans on American Experience.
Watch Monday, February 7th or stream at nepm.org.
You have 90 seconds starting right now.
I always refer to Schools Match Wits as a Western New England institution because it's been around for so long. It's consistent. It's something people can rely on. 61 years.
Math and science for 30.
It's the only show in the region that has that kind of legacy and history. Think of the thousands and thousands of students throughout the region who've been a part of Schools Match Wits. It's kind of an amazing thing.
PBS Kids provides wonderful support and resources for teachers. One of the first things that I like to work on is learning how to communicate, how to solve a problem using your words.
Hi, neighbor.
I use Daniel Tiger in the classroom all the time. I absolutely think that PBS Kids is a valuable and credible source to use as an educator. The kids like to watch it, the kids like to do it, and it's learning, real learning.
Sunday on PBS, starting with Around the World in 80 Days.
Risk your life, be my guest, but stop risking mine.
The beloved series, All Creatures Great and Small.
Is either very brave or very stupid.
followed by murder and mystery on Vienna Blood.
I think they're trying to hide a secret.
It's a night of drama you won't want to miss.
Watch Sunday night starting at 8 or stream anytime at anypm.org.
Boston, big-time developers, luxury residential units.
Very large machine to displace and move out residents.
If these people are evicted, where will they go?
This film is bearing down on me. Other white people need to admit when they've been silent too.
A Reckoning in Boston, Monday at 10 or stream at anypm.org.
For many of us, the new year is the perfect time to look ahead to a brighter future and to think about what we want to accomplish in 2022. One smart and simple way to get the year started is to create a will through our partner, Free Will. No matter what you choose to include in your will, this small act of care for yourself and your loved ones can go a long way. Start your plans today at freewill.com/NEPM.
You're watching New England Public Media, WGBY Springfield.
When the weather turns cold, all I want to do is find a cozy spot to curl up with a good book. I'm Erin O'Neill, host of the NEPM Book Club. I've just finished Harlem Shuffle, the new novel by Pulitzer Prize winner Colson Whitehead. It's a thrilling story of heists, shakedowns, and ripoffs set in 1960s Harlem. We'll be chatting about it at the next online meeting of the book club on January 27. Sign up at nepm.org/book club.